おばんです. He had almost convinced himself it was a bad dream. The accident, the village, the patients, the notes in his medical bag. Almost, until the first patient from the village sat down across from him in his clinic, said, "You treated me last spring." He said, "I have never seen you before." She said, "I know, but the village sent me, and I have your notes, and they are correct, and there are others coming." Find chapter 161st. If you have not yet been to the village, it is time for chapter 161. There is a particular work that bad dreams do. They take something that happened, something the waking mind cannot accommodate, and reclassify it. A dream, simply a dream. The fever of the accident's shock, the mind's way of processing a difficult afternoon. The bad dream explanation is useful and available, and most of us reach for it when we need it. The doctor had reached for it, had been holding it carefully for several months, had almost made it stick, until his waiting room produced a patient whose face he did not recognize, but whose condition he had documented in notes he could not remember writing. In his own handwriting. In a medical bag he had almost convinced himself contained nothing unusual. Several months had passed since the mountain road. The doctor had returned to his practice, had seen his patients, had filed the notes from the village, after reading them twice more, in a folder at the back of his filing cabinet, had not looked at them since, had told himself with increasing conviction that the afternoon had been a product of shock, that the accident, minor as it was, had produced a brief dissociative episode, that the village, the patients, the notes had been the mind's response to an afternoon's disruption. He was almost entirely convinced of this when his receptionist knocked on his consulting room door between appointments and said there was a patient without an appointment who said he had seen her before. She was an elderly woman. She sat across from him with the particular stillness of someone entirely comfortable in medical settings through long familiarity. He looked at her face, did not recognize her, said he didn't believe they had met. She said he had treated her last spring, on a house call, said this simply, as though the detail of a house call explained everything. He said he had no record of treating her. She said the village kept the records, then placed something on the desk between them, a folded document. He opened it, his handwriting. Patient notes for an elderly woman. Observations, diagnosis, recommended treatment. Written with the specific authority of the notes from his medical bag. He looked at the notes for a long time, then looked up at her. "Nanshosu," he said quietly. "How are you?" She said, "Better since you treated me." And then she said there were others coming. If these stories have found their way to you, if you find yourself returning to this quiet room, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. It tells me, and whatever else watches from this room, that you were here and that you intend to find your way back. If you have a story of your own, Granny is always listening, watching, waiting. He retrieved the folder from the back of his filing cabinet, read through the notes again. 3 patients documented, the woman with the 40-year fever, the child, the elderly man with no pulse who had apologized for the inconvenience. He looked at the woman sitting across from him. She was not any of the three. She was a fourth patient, documented in notes he had no memory of writing, about a patient he had no memory of treating. He looked at the handwriting, unmistakably the specific formations of his letters that no one else produced in quite the same way. He looked at the diagnosis, looked at the treatment recommended, then looked at the woman, at her color, at the quality of her breathing, at the particular way she held herself in the chair. Everything consistent with the notes, everything consistent with treatment having been received and having been effective. Shakkoi, the folder in his hands, cold in the way of understanding that the bad dream had considerably more patience in it than he had known. I wonder if a patient arrived in your practice who had notes written in your handwriting about a treatment you had no memory of giving, would you honor the notes, continue the treatment, or would you close the folder and send them away? If you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening. He honored the notes, continued the treatment she had apparently been receiving, asked her carefully how many others were coming. She said she did not know exactly, said the village sent patients when they needed follow-up, said he was their doctor now, said this simply, their doctor now, as though this were a straightforward professional arrangement that had been arrived at through normal channels. He asked how he had been selected. She said the village had been waiting for the right doctor for some time, that the previous doctors, she mentioned names he recognized from the child's list, had each treated patients for a while, that some had continued longer than others, that the village was hoping he would continue for a considerable time. He thanked her for coming, made a follow-up appointment. You are still here. Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder, if you discovered you had been selected as the doctor for a village that does not appear on any map, would you continue seeing their patients? The second patient arrived the following week, the third the week after. By the end of the month, he had seen 7 patients from the village, none of whom he recognized, all of whom had notes in his handwriting documenting previous treatment, all of whom presented in exactly the condition the notes suggested they would. He began keeping a separate section of his filing cabinet for the village patients. A separate appointment book. The village sent patients irregularly, without advance notice, always without appointments. He told his receptionist to accommodate them when they appeared. He did not explain why, simply that they were patients he had seen before. Ndanyaa. That's right indeed. He had seen them before in a village on a mountain road that he could no longer find on any map, but whose patients were finding him with considerable reliability, as they had apparently found his predecessors. I think about what it means to be selected. The village on the mountain road did not choose the doctor randomly, had been waiting through multiple doctors across multiple decades for the one who would honor the notes, who would file the village patients in a separate section of the cabinet, who would tell his receptionist to accommodate the unscheduled appointments without explanation. The accident was not an accident. The ditch was not too deep to drive out of. The woman hanging laundry was not surprised. The child knew the names of the doctors who had come before because the village kept its own records, and the doctor sitting across from a seventh patient whose notes he does not remember writing understands now that the bad dream explanation was never going to stick. Some things choose us considerably more deliberately than we choose them. I have been chosen a few times myself. From this room, beside this kotatsu. Another whispered story from Japan, shared quietly here beside the kotatsu. If you are driving a mountain road and you leave it briefly, a ditch, an inattention, a moment that resolves without injury, and there is a village nearby that was not on your map, walk to it. If they tell you they have been hoping a doctor would pass through, and if you are a doctor, see the patients they bring you, all of them, whatever their conditions. However long those conditions have persisted, treat them as best you can with what is in your bag, and when you leave, when the road appears drivable again and the town is 20 minutes away, do not open your medical bag until you are home, until you are sitting at your desk, until you are ready for what you will find inside it, because the village will have added something. In your handwriting, about patients you treated, and the notes will be more specific than anything you wrote in that village, and more accurate than anything your training should have allowed you to write. And you will file them carefully, because something will tell you very clearly that you will need them again. If this story stayed with you, if the dark or the shadow feels a little closer tonight, you know where to find me. I am always here beside the kotatsu, watching, waiting. And if you wish others to find their way here too, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. I would not object. And if you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening.